Hi, I'm Ollie, and I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do to not only pass your GCSE Edexcel Maths, but to put you in the best position to get every single question correct. This series of videos will cover both foundation and higher courses, and I will make it clear as I go which sections are higher specific and which are relevant for both. So, to get started then, Edexcel splits the course into 5 different sections, and each of these sections offer a different weighting to your exam mark, as you can see from the table here. And you can see this differs slightly between foundation and higher. Higher has a bit more of a focus on algebra, whereas foundation focuses more on number and ratio, proportion, and rates of change. Now, what I will do is I will dive into each of these 5 sections and run through every possible thing that you could be asked about them on the exam, based purely on the exam syllabus, and how you would go about answering the questions, together with examples taken directly from past papers with solutions. So, without further ado, let's get into section 1, number. So, Edexcel splits the number section into 3 different sections, which we will look at. Structure and calculation, which covers ordering numbers, operations, indices, surds, standard form, etc. Fractions, decimals, and percentages, which is self-explanatory, but it also covers ratios. And measures and accuracy, which covers standard units, estimation, rounding, and limits. So, looking first at structure and calculation, the first point on the syllabus is order positive and negative integers, decimals, and fractions. Use the symbols equals, not equals to, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. Now, these will often be the first marks on the paper, only worth 1 or occasionally 2 marks, but still important at the end of the day and can be easy to slip and make mistakes on. So, I've got a couple of examples here for you. So, it's asking us to write these numbers in order of size, starting with the smallest number. So, the key here is just to make sure you're paying attention to minus signs, and all we need to do is list them, starting with the smallest, so -5, -2, 3, 7, and 9, just a 1-mark question. And a second example for you here. Write the following numbers in order of size, start with the smallest number, so you'll be able to see this time we're in decimals, and all you have to do is make sure you're paying attention to the number of decimal places and converting if necessary, just to make it a bit easier for yourself. So since we have 3 decimal places here, I'm just going to change all of these to 3 decimal places. So it's really obvious what order the numbers need to go in. And like we said, starting with the smallest, 0.408 would be the smallest, then 0.41, 0.46, and 0.5. Now when it comes to the symbols, your equals, your not equal to, etc., these will come up in almost every question on the exam. So we won't use a specific example for them, but it will of course be a case of using each of them correctly and making sure when it's less than or equal to, you're taking that into account and not just treating it as a less than. So moving on to N2 then, apply the 4 operations, including formal written methods to integers, decimals, and simple fractions, proper and improper, and mixed numbers, all both positive and negative. Understand and use place value, e.g. when working with very large or very small numbers, and when calculating with decimals. So similarly to N1, these will be one of the first questions on the paper and worth a couple of marks. But it is also worth noting that the skills being described in the number section in general will be tested in later questions too, just they will be within other more complex problems. So what this is basically saying is that you'll need to be able to use addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division on integers, fractions, and mixed numbers, as well as being able to understand place value. So I've got a couple of examples of problems here that will test those skills. So first one here, work out -9 plus 5. So as you can see, this is just adding integers, but one is obviously a negative, so we know that -9 plus 5 is the same as 5 minus 9, which gives us -4. Obviously, they could be more complicated than this, but there is always a question like this for 1 mark at the start of the paper. Another example here, work out 1 3/5 plus 2 1/4. give your answer as a mixed number. So this one, as you can see, is a later question on the paper and is worth 2 marks. So if I was doing this question, I would first convert the 1 3/5 and the 2 1/4 into top-heavy fractions. So 1 3/5 is just the same as saying 5/5 plus 3/5, which would be 8/5. And 2 1/4 is the same as saying 8 1/4 plus 1/4, which is 9/4. So to do 8/5 plus 9/4, we're going to need to make them have a common denominator. Easiest way I find to do that, if the denominators aren't really high numbers, is just multiply these two together. So that's 5 times 4 is 20. So I'm going to get 20 as my denominator. So to do that for 8/5, I'm going to times top and bottom by 4, which gives me 32/20. And then similarly, 9/4 will times top and bottom by 5, gives us 45/20. Adding these together, we just get 77/20. But the question wants us to give it as a mixed number. So that's just going to be 60/20 plus 17/20, which is just 3 and 17/20. And I've just got an example here of a place value style question. So this one's only worth 1 mark, but it basically says write down the value of the 2 in the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's just being aware that a number like this 2 relates to 2000, as the number's 12,345. Now, these are clearly just a few small examples, but these sort of questions come up on every paper, so plenty of scope for practicing. And like I mentioned, you're going to get these sort of problems within the deeper, more complex questions anyway. So these should be relatively nice marks to pick up at the start of the paper. Now, if we look at N3, recognize and use relationships between operations, including inverse operations, e.g. cancellation to simplify calculations and expressions. Use conventional notation for priority of operations, including brackets, powers, roots, and reciprocals. So as with the first 2 points, this is very much a general description of tackling problems that will come up in many of the questions on the paper. It's essentially saying that you're able to use cancellation within equations, as well as use notation correctly, as well as the order of priority, so your BIDMAS or your BODMAS. It also mentions reciprocals. So I've got a couple of questions here. So first one is question 2 on this paper, where they're just asking us to work out 3 squared. So I know it's quite a basic question, but again, it's to start enhancing your skills for later in the paper. So obviously 3 squared is just going to be 9. And then I'm also going to focus on question 3 here, where you've got 2 numbers in brackets and you've got your 20 divided by the 2 numbers in brackets. So as I mentioned, they're talking about order of operations here. So you need to know to do the brackets first and then do the division afterwards. So we'll do the 3 plus 2 comes to 5, and then 20 divided by 5 is just 4. Now this second question is obviously far more complicated than the other example that I just showed you. This one's on a calculator paper, so don't worry, you haven't got to try and work out the square root of 43.87 in your head. But again, I'm focusing here on order of operations. So what we're going to do first here is we're going to do the square root of 43.87, as that would fall under your indices in your BIDMAS. And you're also going to do the 2.1 squared. So I know this says do this on your calculator basically by saying write down the figures on your calculator display, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out what I'm doing. So 25 minus, and on my calculator I'm going to do the square root of 43.87 first, which is 6.623443213. And then similarly, I'm just going to do for now 2.1 squared on my calculator, which comes out as 4.41. Now I'm going to do everything on the top in one go. So 25 minus 6.66234432213, which comes out as 18.3376556.8. You wouldn't normally need to write down everything on your calculator, but I think the fact that it's said write down all the figures on your calculator, I'm just doing it for completeness. And then the bottom is going to be 6 plus 4.41, which is going to give us 10.41. And then I'm going to do that calculation on my calculator, 18.3376556.8 divided by 10.41 gives us 1.76154232. 61 should be a 5. So 1.76154232. So it is just knowing on a bigger question that you need the order of operations to be in that order, basically. And then part B as well, we'll do work out the value of the reciprocal of 0.625. So the understanding of the reciprocal is that it is just 1 divided by 0.625 in this case. It is the opposite of a fraction. So you basically need to convert the 0.625 into a fraction and then flip it upside down. So if you just type in 0.25 into your calculator, it does tell you what the fraction is. So it's 5/8. So the reciprocal is going to be the opposite of that, which is 8/5. Since the question gives it to you in decimals, we're going to change it to decimals, and that's going to be 1.6. So as you can sort of tell, all of these 3 skills that we have gone over so far will be tested throughout the entire paper, not just on these example questions we've gone through. But the fact there are these questions at the start, and not always at the start, that are worth a couple of marks are a good way to get yourself started on the paper and to give you a feel for it. I would always recommend doing these sorts of small questions first to get some easier marks on the board and to prepare you for the more complicated questions that use the same skills later on. In the next video, I will continue with the structure and calculation section. In the meantime, I've been completing past paper walkthroughs on my channel, which are hopefully helpful if you want to check these out. I'm planning on uploading these videos regularly and to run through the full syllabus in like shorter, easier to digest videos like this. So drop a like if you'd like to see that. And between us, we should be able to get through GCSE Edexcel Maths. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.